For 100 years, humanity thought it was at war. A battle against an unstoppable enemy. A war written in blood and fire, fought across dying stars and shattered moon. But what if it was never about victory? What if it was never about survival? What if everything they fought for was a lie? A scarred warrior, a runaway oracle, and a prophecy older than time itself. Ronan Caith was never meant to escape. Seriphus was never meant to betray her people. And the war, it was never meant to end. But now, the cycle is breaking, and when it does, the universe will never be the same. Because the truth isn't just danger, it's watching.
There had been a war for 100 years. Earth's skies, which used to be endless and clear, were now marked with the marks of constant war. Beyond, the void was filled with the silent shades of huge, cruel, and old Verakai warships. The humans fought with everything they had, turning every broken moon and dying star into a battleground. But it was no longer a matter of strategy to stay alive when facing the power of a kingdom whose roots had been lost in time. Someone said a prayer into the darkness. Ronan Caith never thought that prayers worked. Too much had been lost, fought, and bled for him to hold on to the weak pleasures of faith. As a captain in the resistance, he had led mission after mission that destroyed Verakai supply lines and power plants, acting like an angry ghost against their unstoppable power. They were always silent when they died and their ships were always on fire, but he had never seen their face up close. That changed the day he was caught, though. He should have been killed. If a human spy got caught behind enemy lines, they could only die one way. But as he knelt in chains in front of the Empire's cold-eyed lords and waited for the blade, the execution was stopped by a single voice that was calm, clear, and full of more than just order. The last oracle of Verakai, Princess Seriphus, looked at him like she saw a ghost. Ronan didn't think in fate, but luck had faith in him. He didn't care about the scar that ran down his face from a storm of fire and broken steel. What it was to the Verakai was something else. An alert. A forecast that goes back further than the Empire. Sacred texts had talked about the eclipse final for thousands of years. It was a cosmic reckoning that would change the rules of reality. And in the middle of it stood a fighter who had been scarred by the storm. A person. Seriphus should have put him to death. It wasn't just the Empire's will, it was fate. She was short of breath and her mind was filled with images of fire and destruction as she stood in front of him. But she saw something that couldn't be true. She saw her own body next to his. She saw herself running, going to die. Besides that, she saw a secret buried in the rocks of time that could change everything the kingdom and people thought about their war. Ronan Caith got away from the Verakai castle that night. He did not flee alone though. The stars turned into a battlefield for them. It was a hunt for them because some general saw betrayal where Seriphus saw truth. By killers who could move between worlds and cut through reality like a knife through flesh. Her country called her a criminal. The rebels called him a fool. But as they ran deeper into the universe's shadows and learned the secret that the war wasn't what it seemed to be, Ronan began to understand the cruelest lie of all. Earth and Verakai had never been at war with each other. It was never about taking over, staying alive, or getting even. It was like a never-ending cycle that was kept going by the blood of people who thought they were fighting for their rights. And at the center of it, those who made money off of the damage were not seen or touched. The people who make fate, the ones who tell lies. But to go against fate was to invite destruction. There was going to be an eclipse final. It couldn't be stopped. It could only be changed. Seriphus knew the end was coming all along. She knew how much it would cost to break the loop. She knew what Ronan had to do. There would be no winner in the end, not a way out. There was no last heroic act that would free the galaxy. There would only be one option: kill the last hope for people, or make the promise come true, as they become the sign of extinction, because there were no good guys, no saviors. Only the truth, cold, cruel, and endless. The truth was a bad thing. It wasn't a win to be claimed or a burden to be shared. It was a sharp, merciless blade that cut away all the illusions that made life bearable. As Ronan and Seriphus sailed through the empty wrecks of worlds long forgotten, the truth of it sank into their bones and hollowed them out. There was no war. It had never been humanity versus Verakai in the war that had killed generations, turned planets into graveyards, and turned the sky into a never-ending battleground. Who would win, stay alive, or take control of the stars had never been the point. It was always about being in charge. The war was a machine, an old machine that ran on the blood of its soldiers. It kept both sides locked in a never-ending war of destruction, not to win, but to protect something older and more dangerous. Ronan, who was hurt and tired, understood that he had spent his whole life fighting shadows while the real enemy stayed hidden and controlled the war from the space between time and reality. Seriphus already knew. At least she thought that was the case. It was said that the oracle's writings spoke to people in riddles and prophecies written in the bones of dead titans and in the ruins of long-gone society. However, she didn't fully understand until she saw Ronan, looked into his eyes, and caught a glimpse of the storm that would end everything. It was never about winning the war. Making sure that no one ever broke the loop was the point. This never-ending killing went on because no one ever looked past the screen to see the forces that held them captive. But someone had seen. There were sounds coming from the abyss. Ancient societies' ghosts can be seen in the ruins, where their knowledge is written in coded messages that can't be read. It's buried under the remains of long-ago wars. The pattern became more clear as Ronan and Seraphis looked more. The Verakai were not always kings and queens. People had not always been the ones being pushed around. Over the years, the war had changed hands, names and brands, but the cycle stayed the same. The war didn't help the people who fought it, it helped the people who planned it. Those forces were seen too. And that makes me wonder, if everything Ronan and Seraphis knew was a lie, if their entire existence had been manipulated by unseen hands, then what about us? How much of our own history has been shaped by forces we'll never see? Do you think humanity is in control of its own destiny, or are we just players in a game we don't even realize is being played? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. When they met the hunters for the first time, they barely made it. These were not troops of the Verakai, not killer humans. People knew nothing about these beings because they didn't come from any place, time, or existence. Like ghosts, they moved through space and time like air moving through glass and showed up in the time between seconds. They didn't say anything. They didn't talk things out. They only kept quiet. It was the first time Ronan had ever faced an enemy like this. Before he knew what he was fighting, the first hunter almost killed him. It moved without any weight or shape. It was just a shadow that hit before the mind could figure out what it was. Seraphis was the only one who could stop it. Her eyes were glowing with the raw power of an oracle. The words she used were from the dead. The hunters backed away and disappeared into thin air, as if they were being pushed away by something they couldn't control. But they were going to come back. They always did, because Seraphis and Ronan were too close to the truth. It wasn't just that they were on the run anymore. They were strange. Cycle parts that don't fit anymore. And the universe did not like it when mistakes were made in how it was made. As they chased, they went past dying stars and nebulae that were falling, as well as the empty shells of civilizations that had tried to break out of the pattern but failed. Every step forward brought up a new piece of the past and new information that bent the blade even more deeply into Ronan's mind. The war wasn't just a lie, it was a jail. They were running out of time. The eclipse final was getting near. The prophecy wasn't just a faraway story meant to keep the believers in line. It was real. It was true. It was going to happen. It couldn't be stopped, no matter what they did or how hard they fought. Either the circle would keep going or it would be broken. But breaking it would mean something worse than war. There is something worse than destruction. Seraphis knew what was going to happen. She had seen the empty space that lay beyond the eclipse, the breaking down of reality itself. She had seen something else though, a choice. In that case, Ronan had the choice. He was always supposed to be it. He had more than one scar on his face. It was a sign, a key to something that was hidden deep in the very fabric of being. The last of the prophesies talked about a warrior who would stand on the edge of the abyss and decide what would happen to everything. In an instant, he could end the war, breaking the cycle and freeing the world from its never-ending battle. But the price was everything. The circle didn't just keep the war going though. In fact, it kept life going. It was the never-ending destruction and strife that kept everything from falling apart. It would be impossible to fix if Ronan broke it, and the war stopped being a tyrant. But there won't be any more stars either. Not anymore. No more living things. There wasn't a choice between winning and losing. It was a choice between living and dying. With the eclipse final coming up, the stars were on fire and the void shook from the weight of everything that had happened so far. Ronan Caith stood on the edge of what was possible. There were no good guys, no saviors. Only the truth, immortal, unchanging, and without mercy. Ronan felt the decision's weight in his chest like a black hole. It was heavy and impossible to escape. He had fought to stay alive, get revenge, and hold on to the impossible dream that people could build a future beyond the Verakai's control. But now that he was on the edge of the eclipse final, all those fights and sacrifices felt like sounds from a game that he couldn't see. He had not fought for freedom before. It was like he was in a story that was written before he was born. Seraphis looked at him with those strange eyes, and the light from a dying star in the distance lit up her face. The last oracle was the daughter of an empire that was built on war, and she was born to keep the world in order. Still, she had broken away from it. She decided to be alone, to tell the truth, and to be with him. She didn't do it out of love or loyalty. She did it because she knew the end was coming and wouldn't let it happen without a fight. In a low voice, she said, "You don't have to do this." But they both knew it was a lie. There had always been only one way to go from the moment Ronan set foot on this road. In the end, Eclipse was not a moment. It was an event, the coming together of forces that had been set in motion long before people went to the stars. The war between Earth and the Verakai was only a small part of the bigger picture. The real fight happened across realms and lives that were stacked on top of each other like layers of a dream that was forgotten. Now, though, that circle was ending. The hunters were no longer after them. That was the first clue that they were getting close. The second thing was the quiet. Wars had stopped all over the galaxy, and spaceships were just hanging in space with their engines dead and their weapons cold. It was like the whole universe had stopped and was holding its breath. He clenched his hands. He had always imagined himself as a fighter, a man with a goal, someone who fought and died for the cause. But there was no more reason to do it. No lies, just the honest truth. It was up to him. In other words, to walk away, let the war go on, and let the wheel keep turning. People would hurt, but they would keep going. The Verakai would always be its enemy, but life would go on. Or to break it, to go against the norm, to take apart the machines of fate that had kept civilizations killing each other over and over again. However, if he did that, he would tear reality apart. Seraphis tried to get around it. She had looked through the long-lost ruins of the first oracles, helped people figure out their long-lost languages, and search the void for solutions in the songs of dying stars. Any forecast or vision, though, always came back to the same answer. The circle was what it all started with. There was nothing without it. Ronan was the key. He looked into the cold, clear surface of the control panel in front of him and saw himself. His face scar burned, as if the world itself was marking him to remind him of what he was. The bell ringer, the storm. This is the fighter of the eclipse. Seraphis moved closer, and her presence brought him back to the present. "We don't know what will happen if you do this," she said in a whisper. It was over. "We know what will happen if I don't." She turned her head down. She had always been able to see into the future, but she couldn't see this time or this choice. It was the end of prophecy with the eclipse final, the end of everything they knew. People and Verakai had never been at war with each other. There was always a fight between those who kept the loop going and those who wanted to break it. Now, in the empty space, Ronan made his decision. It was like the weight of all time was pressing down on them. With trembling fingers, he reached forward and started the last process. The eclipse lit up. The whole universe screamed. Time fell apart. As the stars broke apart, light poured out of their centers like the molten veins of long-lost gods. Soldiers from all over the galaxy, both humans and Verakai, fell down as the weight of history broke them. The cycle tried to fight back by turning and writhing and putting itself back together, but Ronan had already hit it in the middle. Seraphis dropped to her knees and banged her head against her hands. Her breath was rough. She had too much going on in her mind at once. The past, the present, and futures that didn't exist. The Verakai throne world, which was once a powerful lighthouse, fell apart. Earth, which was far away and weak, shook as the very structure of its reality changed. Everything that had been set in stone had been undone, rewritten, or erased. Every fight, battle, and death. And deep inside, something very old started to move. Something that had been asleep for a very long time. Ronan knew there was something watching him in the void that was so big and hard to understand. The builders. The ones who made the circle. They were the ones who kept the war going and made sure that no society ever got too powerful for their invisible hand to control. They were happy to go unnoticed for a very long time because they knew the cycle would always start over. Now, though Ronan had broken the wheel, they were getting up. Seraphis gasped and reached out to touch him. "Ronan, the void broke up. Shapes started to appear out of nowhere. They were huge, celestial beings, and their shapes changed like liquid dark and burning light. They were there, but they didn't have faces or real bodies. They were not happy about it. The circle was set up for a reason. Put things in order. Handle well-being. Without it, the world would fall apart into chaos, anarchy, and destruction that we can't even imagine. They had kept the balance for longer than anyone could remember, leading civilizations in the direction they thought was best. But Ronan had messed up their plan. Now they were going to take him apart. The choice was never about getting ahead. It was always about who would make the future. And the architects didn't want a normal person to change their big plan. Seraphis grabbed his arm, and her voice was almost a whisper. "We need to run." But there was no place to hide. The cycle ended with the eclipse. But it was the start of something much, much worse. The whole universe shook. When the cycle ended, there was silence. It wasn't the peaceful nothingness of space. but something deeper, like an emptiness that seemed to hold its breath. Ronan could feel the weight of it in his bones. It reminded him of a fight that never should have happened. He broke things that were never meant to be broken and touched things that couldn't be touched. They were no longer there. That is, it is not lost like a soldier falls in war or erased like a dying star coming apart. They had just stopped. One moment they were there, big and timeless, changing things the way they saw fit. They were nothing the next. On the other hand, the world did not be happy. In the void, there was no win or declaration of war. Nothing but silence. Ronan was standing on solid ground, but he didn't know where he was. A world he didn't know, but that was real under his feet. He could feel the stars in the sky, which was full of them but didn't feel the same. They were warm. Seraphim stood next to him when he turned around. Her golden eyes were filled with something he couldn't name. There were no ships in the sky. There was no war going on far away. It wasn't like there was ever a fight. It was like the universe had changed without it. Ronan let out a slow breath. Did we win? It took Seraphis a while to answer. Her unfocused gaze moved to the distance, as if she were looking for something that wasn't there. She finally spoke, but her voice was so low it was almost a whisper. I don't think this was ever about winning, and Ronan understood in some way. There were no good guys, not a winner, not any parties. The war was just a dream. The circle had been a jail. They were free for the first time now. A thought came to Ronan's mind as he looked up at the strange stars. They were no longer there. The circle was broken, but something else had moved in its place. Something not seen. Something is looking. Every story has an ending, but some only prepare us for something even greater. What if I told you that what comes next is even more astonishing? You won't want to miss the next story. Click now and find out.